The bullet should have been impossible, over a kilometer through mountain darkness. Crosswind gusting at 12 miles per hour. No spotter, no backup, no orders to engage. Sergeant Aria Vale squeezed the trigger anyway. 1 mile away, a machine gunner's skull exploded in a red mist before he could cut down the trapped American team below. His finger never reached the trigger. 23 more hostiles, 8 minutes before extraction. Zero chance of survival. Aria chambered another round. She had just ended her career to save 12 lives. But saving them meant finishing what she'd started, and the enemy sniper who'd just locked onto her position had other plans. One shot had changed everything. The next would decide if anyone lived to tell about it. If you want to see how one soldier rewrote the rules of combat, stay with me until the very end. Drop a like and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The valley was dying in segments. Aria could see it through her Schmidt and Bender scope. The way death moved in organized patterns, methodical and efficient. Muzzle flashes strobed from 3 positions, forming a perfect kill box. The 12-man ODA team pinned in the ravine below had maybe 4 minutes before those patterns intersected at their position and erased them from existence. She shouldn't be here. Shouldn't be watching. Definitely shouldn't be ranging targets. Overwatch 3. This is TOC. Confirm your position and status. The radio crackled against her chest. Aria didn't move, didn't breathe. Her finger rested along the trigger guard of her M201. Oh, the weapon almost alive beneath her hands on this freezing Afghan ridge. Overwatch 3, respond. She keyed the mic with her chin. TOC, Overwatch 3, position holding, no engagement. Copy that, maintain observation only. QRF is wheels up in 40 mics. 40 minutes. The team below had 4. Aria killed the radio and returned to her scope. The math was brutal and simple. 3 PKM machine gun positions. Approximately 8 to 10 fighters per position. Overlapping fields of fire designed to shred anything that moved in that ravine. The ODA team's only cover was a cluster of boulders that wouldn't stop 7.62 rounds for long. She'd been watching for 6 minutes now. Watching American soldiers, her people, get systematically cornered like animals. Their radio chatter filled her other ear, the desperation bleeding through tactical discipline. Chaos 6, we are danger close on all sides, requesting immediate air support. Chaos 6, negative on CAS, weather socked in, QRF is your only option. We don't have 40 minutes. No, they didn't. Aria's hands were steady. They were always steady. That's what separated the elite from everyone else. The ability to be perfectly calm while everything turned to hell. Her grandfather had taught her that. Master Sergeant James Vale, 2 tours in Vietnam, 1 in Desert Storm, and more confirmed kills than the Army would ever officially acknowledge. Accuracy is just mechanics, little hawk, he used to say, his weathered hands guiding her young fingers along the stock of his old Remington 700. Any fool can hit a target in perfect conditions. But knowing when to shoot, that's what separates soldiers from survivors. She was 10 years old then, barely able to hold the rifle without the bipod. He'd set up a tin can at 400 yards across the Wyoming prairie, wind whipping the grass in chaotic patterns. Can't even see it, Grandpa. Then don't look with your eyes, feel the wind, watch the grass, see what's invisible. She'd missed that first shot by 3 feet, the second by 1. The third punched clean through the can with a metallic ping that echoed across the valley. Her grandfather had smiled, a rare thing. There she is. Now 15 years later, on a mountain ridge 7,000 miles from that Wyoming ranch, Aria felt the wind the same way. 8 miles per hour, right to left. Gusting to 12. Temperature dropping. Air density increasing. The valley below was a crucible of variables, and she was calculating them all without conscious thought. The lead machine gunner shifted position. Range, 1,247 meters. He was setting up for a final push, angling his PKM to rake the Americans' cover position. In 90 seconds, he'd have the angle. In 2 minutes, the team below would be dead. Her orders were crystal clear. Observe only. Her conscience was clearer. 12 Americans were about to die while she watched. Aria had spent 8 years in the Army, 4 in special operations. She'd deployed to 5 countries, racked up 3 confirmed combat kills, and earned a reputation as the best long-range marksman in her battalion, a title that came with equal parts respect and resentment, because she was a woman in a world that still didn't fully trust women with rifles. She'd heard it all. In training, in the field, in quiet conversations she wasn't supposed to hear. She's good, but can she handle the pressure? Different when someone's shooting back. Well, wonder if she'll freeze when it counts. She never had. Not in Helmand province when insurgents ambushed her convoy and she dropped 2 fighters at 800 meters while pinned behind a burning Humvee. Not in Syria when ISIS fighters tried to overrun her observation post and she held them off for 20 minutes until reinforcement arrived. But this was different. This wasn't defense. This was defiance. The machine gunner below adjusted his position again. Through the scope, Aria could see his face. Young, maybe early 20s, bearded, wearing a mismatched uniform that marked him as Taliban. He looked confident, well-trained. He knew he had the Americans trapped. She ranged him again. 1,247 meters. Wind now steady at 9 miles per hour. Elevation difference, 340 feet. Coriolis effect negligible at this range. Temperature 34 degrees Fahrenheit. The M2010 in her hands was loaded with 300 Winchester Magnum rounds, 175 grain boat-tail hollow points designed for exactly this kind of shot. She'd zeroed this rifle personally, knew its quirks, trusted it like her own heartbeat. 1 shot. Clean. The machine gun goes silent. The team below gets a window, but 1 shot meant court-martial, meant ending her career, meant admitting she'd valued 12 lives over the entire chain of command. Her radio crackled again. All Chaos elements, this is Chaos 6. We're down to small arms. Request immediate. An explosion cut him off. RPG impact. Screaming followed. Aria's jaw tightened. 8 years of service. 8 years of following orders, proving herself, fighting for respect in a system designed to doubt her. Gone with 1 trigger pull. She thought about her grandfather one more time. His last words before the cancer took him. The hardest shots aren't the long ones, little hawk. They're the ones where you have to decide if the target deserves to die. The machine gunner below turned his weapon toward the American position. Aria made her decision. She controlled her breathing. Slow inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth. Her heart rate dropped from 72 to 58 beats per minute. The world narrowed to the scope picture. Wind steady, range confirmed, angle calculated. The crosshairs settled on the machine gunner's temple. She didn't feel righteous, didn't feel heroic. She felt necessary. The trigger broke clean. The M2010 roared. Recoil punched her shoulder, a familiar violence. The suppressor tamed most of the muzzle flash, but not all. For one brief moment, Aria was visible on the ridgeline. Through the scope, she watched the round travel, a dark streak against the night sky, and then impact. The machine gunner's head snapped sideways. He dropped like a puppet with cut strings. The PKM clattered against the rocks, suddenly silent. The valley erupted in confusion. What the hell was that? Sniper! We got a sniper! Where's it coming from? The Taliban fighters scattered, abandoning their coordinated positions. The second machine gun crew ducked behind cover. The third started swinging their weapon toward the ridgeline, toward her. Aria was already chambering another round. Overwatch 3, this is Chaos 6. Was that you? She didn't answer. Couldn't. Speaking meant admitting what she'd done. The second machine gunner popped up from cover, trying to locate her position. Range, 1,190 meters. Wind shifted 10 miles per hour now, slightly quartering. She adjusted, fired. The round caught him in the chest. Center mass. He went down hard. Holy shit, Overwatch 3. Keep shooting. The valley was chaos now. The Taliban fighters knew they were being hunted, but couldn't pinpoint her location. They fired wildly toward the ridgeline, bullets sparking off rocks hundreds of meters from her position. But they weren't stupid. Someone down there was organizing a response. Aria scanned through her scope, looking for leadership targets. There. A fighter with a radio, gesturing to others. Probably the squad leader. Range, 1,340 meters. Longer shot. Wind gusting unpredictably. She waited for the gust to pass. 3 seconds. 2. Fired. The round went low, caught him in the abdomen instead of the chest. He went down screaming. Not a clean kill, but it removed a leader. Overwatch 3, you are cleared hot. Say again, cleared hot. Too late for that. She was already committed. 3 down. 21 remaining. The ODA team was moving now, using the confusion to reposition. Smart. They were hauling their wounded, leapfrogging toward better cover. But the enemy was adapting faster than she'd hoped. A new voice crackled over the Taliban's radio frequency. She'd been monitoring their comms on her secondary receiver. The voice was calm, authoritative, speaking Pashto with a Kandahari accent. Sniper on the ridge, northeast position. Send the hunter. Aria's stomach tightened. Hunter. That meant counter-sniper. She'd just painted a target on herself. The smart move was to displace immediately, change positions, never fire more than 2 shots from the same location. That was basic sniper doctrine. But moving meant abandoning her overwatch, meant the team below would lose their guardian angel. She stayed. 4th target, an RPG team setting up for another shot at the Americans. Range, 1,156 meters. Wind, 9 miles per hour, right to left. She put a round through the RPG gunner's spine. He folded backward, and the rocket launcher clattered down the rocks. Keep hitting them, we're almost clear. 5th target, a fighter trying to flank the American position. Range, 1,089 meters. Easy shot. She dropped him mid-stride. That's when the first counter-sniper round cracked past her head. The supersonic snap came before the sound. A physics lesson delivered at 2,800 feet per second. The bullet passed so close she felt the displacement wave against her cheek. Rock chips exploded from the boulder next to her head, stinging her face. He'd found her. Aria didn't move. Moving meant silhouetting herself. Instead, she scanned through the scope, looking for muzzle flash, looking for position. There. Ridge opposite her position, maybe 900 meters out. A figure in the shadows, barely visible. He was good, using natural cover, minimizing his profile. But he'd fired from a static position. Amateur mistake. She ranged him, 892 meters. Wind, 8 miles per hour. Elevation advantage, hers. But he was already moving, disappearing into the rocks. Overwatch 3, you got company? Affirm, she said quietly. First word she'd spoken since disobeying orders. Another round snapped past, closer this time. He was walking his shots toward her, using sound to narrow her position. Classic counter-sniper technique. The ODA team was still moving, still exposed. She couldn't leave yet. 6th target. Another machine gunner trying to set up. Range, 1,223 meters. She fired. Hit. The gunner dropped. Immediately she rolled left, behind different cover. The counter-sniper's next round hit exactly where she'd been, punching through the space her head had occupied 2 seconds earlier. He was very good. Aria's radio erupted. Overwatch 3, QRF is 10 minutes out. Can you hold? 10 minutes. Might as well be 10 hours. She keyed the mic. Negative. You need to move now. I'm compromised. We've got wounded. Then carry them faster. She scanned for the counter-sniper again. He'd displaced, changed positions. Professional. He understood the game they were playing. 7th target. A Taliban fighter coordinating the others via radio. Range, 1,267 meters. She put him down with a headshot. The counter-sniper fired again. This round came from a different angle. He'd moved 40 meters to her left, trying to triangulate. The bullet hit the rock face behind her, sending fragments into her back. Her body armor stopped the worst of it, but pain flared across her shoulder blade. The valley was quieter now. The Taliban fighters had taken cover, waiting for their sniper to finish the job. Smart. Let the hunter work. Aria's breathing was still controlled, but her heart rate had climbed to 95. Adrenaline was manageable in small doses. Too much, and fine motor control degraded. She needed to end this. The Americans were moving faster now, bounding toward the extraction point. Maybe 6 minutes to safety, maybe 5. But the counter-sniper had her pinned. Every time she moved, he fired. He was patient, disciplined, waiting for her to make a mistake. So she gave him one. Aria shifted her position deliberately, just enough movement to draw his attention. She saw the muzzle flash before she heard the shot. There. Ridge at 11 o'clock, partially obscured by a rock outcropping. Range, 847 meters. She'd already pre-aimed at that position, gambling he'd use it. The M2010 was pointed, her finger on the trigger. He fired. She fired. His round tore through her pack, missing her spine by inches. Her round found him center mass, punching through his chest cavity. Through the scope, she watched him slump forward, weapon falling from his hands. The valley went silent. No more machine guns. No more counterfire. Just the wind and the distant sound of the Americans running for their lives. Overwatch 3, we're clear. Repeat, we are clear of the kill box. Aria didn't respond. She was scanning, confirming. Every hostile position, every threat. All neutralized. 8 shots fired, 7 confirmed kills. 1 wound that would be fatal without immediate medical attention. And the Taliban weren't known for their field hospitals. 12 Americans alive because she'd chosen to disobey orders. Her radio crackled. Overwatch 3, this is TOC. Explain your engagement. She took a breath. Keyed the mic. TOC, Overwatch 3. I violated ROE. Multiple unauthorized engagements. Hostile counter-sniper neutralized. Friendly casualties, 0. Silence on the other end. Long enough that she thought the connection had dropped. Then, Overwatch 3, RTB immediately. You are to report to the battalion commander upon arrival. Do you copy? Copy. She safed her weapon and started packing. Her hands were steady. They were always steady. But her mind was already calculating the cost. Court-martial. Dishonorable discharge. Prison time, maybe. The army didn't look kindly on soldiers who ignored direct orders, no matter how many lives they saved. Below, the ODA team was linking up with the QRF. Alive. Whole. Worth it. Aria slung her rifle and began the 2-hour hike back to base. The mountain was quiet now, the firefight fading into memory. Soon it would just be another incident report, another classified briefing, another story that never made it past the wire. But for 12 soldiers, it would be the night they should have died and didn't. And for Aria Vale, it would be the night she learned what her grandfather really meant. The hardest shots aren't about hitting the target. They're about living with what happens after you pull the trigger. The base was waiting when she arrived, not with gratitude, with military police. 2 MPs flanked her the moment she crossed the wire, professional and silent. They didn't cuff her. She was still a soldier, technically, but their presence made the message clear. She was in custody. The walk through the compound was long. Word had spread. Soldiers watched from doorways, some with respect, some with confusion, others with the careful neutrality of people who didn't want to pick sides before the official verdict came down. The ODA team was there too. 12 men, battered and bandaged, standing in formation outside the TOC. As Aria passed, their commanding officer, a scarred captain with blood still on his uniform, saluted. It wasn't regulation, wasn't appropriate given the circumstances, but every man in that formation followed suit. The MPs didn't stop her from returning the salute. Small mercy. Inside the TOC, Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Hale was waiting. He was a career officer, a West Point graduate with 2 Bronze Stars and a reputation for running operations by the book. Exactly the kind of commander who would crucify a soldier for insubordination. He dismissed the MPs with a gesture. Sergeant Vale, sit. She sat. Hale studied her for a long moment. His face was unreadable, a skill that came with 20 years of command. Do you understand what you've done? Yes, sir. 12 men are alive because of you. Yes, sir. And you violated direct orders, engaged without authorization, exposed your position, risked compromising the entire operation. Yes, sir. If that counter-sniper had killed you, we'd have lost our Overwatch and possibly the ODA team as well. Yes, sir. Hale leaned back in his chair. The rulebook says I should have you court-martialed, dishonorably discharged, made an example of. Aria said nothing. But that ODA team is alive, and the after-action reports are going to show that your engagement disrupted a planned Taliban ambush that would have resulted in mass casualties. He pulled a folder from his desk, flipped it open. 7 confirmed kills, 1 wounded, 0 friendly casualties, All targets verified as hostile combatants actively engaged in an attack on U.S. forces. He looked up. That's going in the official report. Aria blinked. Sir? You're being recommended for the Silver Star. The world tilted slightly. Sir, I disobeyed. You made a tactical decision under fire. Hale's voice was flat, final. The enemy engaged our forces. You returned fire. Everything else is interpretation. That's not what happened. It's what the paperwork says. And the paperwork is all that matters. He closed the folder. You saved 12 lives, Sergeant. I'm not going to end your career for that. But understand something. He leaned forward. You got lucky. The outcome was perfect. Every shot landed. Every hostile dropped. The team extracted clean. But if even one variable had changed, if you'd missed, if the counter-sniper had been faster, if civilians had been in that valley, you'd be in Leavenworth right now. I know, sir. Do you? Hale's eyes were hard. Because the next time you decide to play God with your rifle, you might not be the one who pays the price. The words hit harder than she expected. You're dismissed, Sergeant. Get some rest. We'll debrief properly in the morning. Aria stood, saluted, turned to leave. Vale? She stopped. Those 12 men would be dead without you. Remember that. But also remember, being right doesn't always mean you get to choose. She nodded and left. Outside, the night was cold and clear, stars sharp as broken glass. Somewhere in the valley, the bodies of 8 men were cooling in the dark. 8 men who'd woken up that morning expecting to live and hadn't made it to dawn. Because of her. Aria walked to her quarters, dropped her gear, and sat on her bunk. The adrenaline was fading now, replaced by something heavier. Not regret. Not doubt. Responsibility. Her grandfather had tried to warn her. The weight wasn't in pulling the trigger. It was in the years after, carrying the memory of every face, every choice, every consequence. She looked at her hands, still steady, for now. But somewhere in the distance, another firefight was starting. Another crisis brewing, another impossible choice waiting. And Aria Vale knew, with absolute certainty, that this wouldn't be the last time she'd have to decide between orders and lives. The only question was whether she'd survive the next one. The Silver Star came 3 weeks later, pinned to her chest in a ceremony she didn't want. Aria stood at attention while the battalion commander read the citation aloud, sanitized language that transformed disobedience into heroism. For gallantry in action against an armed enemy, the words meant nothing. She'd broken the rules and gotten rewarded for it because the outcome was clean. But outcomes were never guaranteed. The medal felt heavy, wrong, like wearing someone else's skin. Afterward, in the crowded mess hall, soldiers she'd never spoken to approached with congratulations. Most were genuine, some weren't. She could tell the difference by how they shook her hand. Too firm meant resentment, too brief meant discomfort. Staff Sergeant Derek Moss was neither. He just leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching her with the kind of expression that said he'd already made up his mind about something. Hell of a night you had, he said when she finally escaped the crowd. Aria grabbed a coffee. Just doing my job. No, your job was to observe. He pushed off the wall, stepped closer. You decided 12 lives were worth more than the chain of command. They were. Maybe. Moss tilted his head. Or maybe you just wanted to prove you could. The accusation landed like a slap. Aria turned to face him fully. You have something to say, Sergeant? Yeah, I think you're dangerous. His voice was low, calm. Not because you're a bad shot, because you think rules don't apply when you're holding a rifle. I think rules are written by people who aren't watching soldiers die in real time. Everyone thinks that until their own call gets someone killed. Moss stepped back. Silver Star looks good on you, though. Wear it well. He left before she could respond. Aria stared at her coffee, suddenly not thirsty. The liquid was black, bitter, cooling fast, like everything else in this place. She'd saved 12 men and earned a medal. She should have felt proud. Instead, she felt like a countdown clock had just started ticking. The summons came 2 days later, not from her battalion commander, from JSOC, Joint Special Operations Command. A bland email with coordinates and a time. No explanation, no context. Just, report to Building 7, 0600, come alone. Building 7 didn't officially exist on base maps. It was a windowless concrete structure near the airfield, guarded by contractors who didn't wear name tags and carried weapons with no serial numbers. The kind of place where classified operations were planned and deniable actions were authorized. Aria had never been inside. She arrived at 0550, dressed in her cleanest uniform, silver star conspicuously absent. The guard at the door scanned her ID, checked her face against a tablet, and waved her through without a word. Inside, the building was sterile. White walls, fluorescent lights, the smell of industrial cleaner and expensive coffee. A woman in civilian clothes, khakis and a polo, the unofficial uniform of intelligence officers, met her in the hallway. "Sergeant Vale, follow me." They walked in silence through a maze of corridors until they reached a conference room. Inside, 3 people waited: a graying Army colonel, a Navy SEAL commander still wearing his trident, and a woman in her 40s with the kind of posture that screamed CIA. The civilian woman gestured to a chair. "Sit." Aria sat. The colonel spoke first. "Sergeant Vale, what we're about to discuss is classified at the TS/SCI level. You will not repeat any part of this conversation. Acknowledge." "Acknowledged, sir." The SEAL commander leaned forward. "We've been watching you for 6 months. Your performance in Helmand, the Syria OP, and now this." He tapped a folder on the table. 7 targets, 8 shots, 0 collateral, under pressure, at night, with a counter-sniper actively hunting you. Aria said nothing. The CIA woman smiled slightly. "You broke every rule in the book, and somehow you're sitting here with a silver star instead of awaiting court-martial. Impressive." "I did what needed to be done." "Yes, you did." The woman opened a laptop, turned it toward Aria. On the screen was a map of the Middle East with red dots scattered across Iraq, Syria, and Afghanistan. "These are high-value targets, insurgent leaders, weapons smugglers, bomb makers, the kind of people who don't stand still long enough for a drone strike and are too well protected for a conventional raid." The colonel took over. "We need someone who can operate independently, make decisions in real time, take shots that shouldn't be possible. You're recruiting me for something. We're offering you a choice." The SEAL commander slid a document across the table. "Join a special access program. No unit designation. No public record. You'd be detached from your current command, operating under a different chain entirely." Aria scanned the first page. The language was vague. Direct action missions, high-risk target elimination, autonomous operation authority. Basically, assassinations with legal cover. "This is a kill team," she said flatly. "This is a scalpel," the CIA woman corrected. "Precision tools for problems that can't be solved with a hammer." "And if I say no?" The colonel shrugged. "You go back to your unit. Keep being the best sniper in the battalion. Probably deploy twice more. Earn another medal. Retire with a pension." He paused. "And every time you're on Overwatch, you'll remember you could have done more." The words hit harder than they should have. Aria looked at the document again. No names, no unit patches, just a signature line and a classification stamp. "How many others are in this program?" "That's classified." "What's the operational tempo?" "Classified." "Success rate?" The SEAL commander smiled. "Perfect. So far." Of course it was. Because anyone who failed probably disappeared from the record entirely. Aria thought about the valley. The machine gunner's head snapping back. The counter-sniper slumping forward. 8 men dead because she'd decided their lives were worth less than American ones. She'd done it without hesitation, without regret. Maybe Moss was right. Maybe she was dangerous. "I need time to think." "You have 48 hours. The colonel stood, signaling the meeting was over. "After that, the offer expires." Aria left the building with the document folded in her pocket. Outside, the sun was rising over the airfield, painting the desert in shades of orange and gold. Helicopters were spinning up for morning patrols. Soldiers were running PT in formation, their cadence calls echoing across the tarmac. Normal. Routine. The machinery of war grinding forward. She could stay in this world, the one with rules, structure, accountability. Or she could step into the shadows and become something else entirely. The problem was, she already knew which one felt right. That evening, Aria found herself at the base gym, beating hell out of a heavy bag. Left jab, right cross, hook. Her knuckles were wrapped but still aching. She liked the pain. It was honest. You fight like someone with something to prove. She turned. The speaker was a woman in PT gear, late 30s, lean and scarred. Master Sergeant Rachel Torrance, one of the few female snipers who'd been in the game longer than Aria. Just blowing off steam, Aria said. Rachel stepped closer, lowered her voice. I know what they offered you. Aria's hand stilled on the bag. How? Because they offered me the same thing, 2 years ago. Rachel glanced around, making sure they were alone. I said no. Why? Because I like sleeping at night. Rachel's expression was hard. You take that job, Vale. You stop being a soldier. You become a weapon, and weapons don't get to choose their targets. We're already weapons. No, we're soldiers. There's a difference. Rachel grabbed a water bottle, took a drink. Soldiers have rules, accountability. A chain of command that answers to someone. Those people in Building 7, they answer to ghosts and politicians. You become their tool. You lose the right to say no. Aria thought about the valley again. I already said no to orders once. And you got lucky. Rachel's voice softened slightly. I read the after action. You made the right call. But that was one night, one choice, with variables you could see. This program? You'll be making those calls in the dark, with half the intel, and no one to back you up if it goes sideways. Sounds like every deployment I've ever been on. It's not. Rachel set down the water bottle. Look, you're talented, best I've seen in years. But talent doesn't mean you're ready for what they're asking. Then what does? Rachel studied her for a long moment, knowing the difference between doing what's necessary and doing what you're told, and being able to live with both. She left without another word. Aria hit the bag 3 more times, then stopped. Her knuckles were bleeding through the wraps. She unwrapped her hands slowly, watching the blood seep into the fabric, red on white, clean lines, easy to see. Not like the moral lines everyone kept talking about. Those were blurry, shifting, context-dependent. Her grandfather had understood that. She pulled out her phone, scrolled through old photos until she found one. Her and James Vale on the ranch, both holding rifles, both grinning. She was 16 in that photo, skinny, sunburned, completely certain the world made sense. He'd died 3 years later. Pancreatic cancer, fast and brutal. His last words to her, whispered in a hospice room that smelled like antiseptic and failure. Don't let them make you small, little hawk. And don't let them make you cruel. The space between is where you'll find out who you are. She'd been holding his hand when he stopped breathing. Aria closed the phone, looked at her bleeding knuckles, the space between. She'd spent 8 years trying to find it, trying to be good enough, strong enough, disciplined enough to earn respect in a world that defaulted to skepticism. Every qualification, every deployment, every perfect shot had been proof she belonged. And now they wanted her to step outside that world entirely, become something without a name, without accountability, without limits. The idea should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like permission. The next 48 hours dragged. Aria went through the motions, training, briefings, maintenance on her equipment. But her mind was elsewhere, running scenarios, calculating risks. She avoided Moss, avoided Rachel, avoided everyone who might try to talk her out of the decision she'd already made. On the second night, she sat alone in her quarters, the unsigned document on her bunk. The pen felt heavier than her rifle. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. It's open. Captain Ethan Cross entered, the ODA team leader she'd saved in the valley. He looked better than the last time she'd seen him, the blood washed off, the bandages replaced with fresh ones. Got a minute, Sergeant? Sure. Cross closed the door, leaned against it. I heard rumors. About an offer. Aria's jaw tightened. Rumors spread fast. I'm not here to talk you out of anything. He pulled something from his pocket, a challenge coin, set it on her bunk next to the document. I'm here to say thank you, officially. The coin was from his unit, custom made. On one side, the ODA team insignia. On the other, a single word, Guardian. 12 of us went home because you decided we mattered more than your career, Cross said quietly. I don't know what they're offering you. Don't need to. But I know this. Whatever you choose, you've already proven you'll do the right thing when it counts. Aria picked up the coin. It was warm from his pocket. I broke the rules. Yeah, you did. Cross smiled slightly. And if you hadn't, I'd be in a body bag right now. So would 11 other guys. Wives would be widows. Kids would be fatherless, all because someone followed orders instead of their instincts. He pushed off the door. Whatever you decide, Sergeant, know that you've got people who trust you. Not because of your rank or your medals. Because when everything went to hell, you didn't hesitate. He left before she could respond. Aria sat there, holding the coin, staring at the word guardian. Not soldier, not sniper. Guardian. Someone who protected others. Someone who made the hard calls. Someone who stepped into the line of fire when everyone else stepped back. She looked at the unsigned document, then at the coin, then at the photo of her grandfather on her phone, the space between. She picked up the pen. 40 minutes later, she was back in Building 7, handing the signed document to the CIA woman, who smiled like she'd expected nothing less. Welcome to the program, Sergeant Vale. You ship out in 72 hours. Where to? Classified. You'll be briefed en route. The woman stood, extended her hand. One more thing. From this point forward, you don't exist in official records. No unit designation, no service jacket. If something goes wrong, the Army will disavow all knowledge of your activities. Understood? Good. The woman's smile didn't reach her eyes. Because once you're in, there's no walking away. This isn't a deployment, it's a commitment. Aria shook her hand. I'm aware. She left Building 7 for the second time, but now everything felt different. The base looked the same. Soldiers moving between buildings, helicopters overhead, the constant rhythm of military life. But she was already separate from it, already a ghost. In 72 hours, she'd disappear into the kind of war that didn't make the news, the kind fought in shadows, with bullets that had no paper trail and targets that never officially existed. She should have felt afraid. Instead, she felt ready. Because for the first time since pulling that trigger in the valley, she wasn't pretending to be something she wasn't. She was exactly what the world needed her to be. A weapon with a conscience. A soldier without a leash. And somewhere out there, high-value targets were going about their lives, completely unaware that their days were now numbered. Aria Vale had just become their countdown clock. The next 3 days blurred together. She packed light. Personal items went into storage, weapons and gear were returned to the armory. The Army didn't need to know she'd be issued entirely different equipment wherever she was going. On the final night, she found herself at the base memorial wall, a black granite slab engraved with names of soldiers killed in action. 37 names from this battalion alone. 37 people who'd followed orders, done their jobs, and still ended up in the ground. She traced one name with her finger. Corporal James McKinney, 22 years old, killed by an IED 3 months ago while on patrol. She'd been his overwatch that day, scanning rooftops while his squad moved through the streets below. She'd seen everything, the pressure plate, the blast, the chaos, and she'd been powerless to stop it, just like she would have been powerless in the valley if she'd followed orders. You thinking about the ones you saved or the ones you couldn't? Aria turned. Moss stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets. Both, she admitted. He stepped closer, read McKinney's name. He was a good kid. Wanted to be a teacher when he got out. I know. They stood in silence for a moment. I heard you're leaving, Moss said finally. News travels. It does. He glanced at her. I was hard on you the other day. About the Silver Star. You meant it. Yeah, I did. Moss exhaled slowly. But I also know what it's like to make a call that saves lives. And what it's like to second-guess yourself for years afterward. He nodded toward the memorial. McKinney died because we followed doctrine, stayed on the route, didn't deviate. Orders were clear. You can't blame yourself for that. Can I? Moss's voice was bitter. I was team leader. I saw the street looked wrong, but I followed the plan anyway. And he died. Aria understood then. Moss wasn't angry at her for breaking rules. He was angry at himself for not breaking them when it mattered. You're going somewhere you'll have to make those calls every day, Moss said. Wherever that is. Yeah. Then do me a favor. He looked her in the eye. Don't become like me. Don't let the rule book get someone killed just because it's easier to follow orders than to think. I won't. Good. He extended his hand. Stay sharp, Vale. She shook it. You too. Moss walked away, leaving her alone with the names and the weight of 37 decisions that had ended in death. She stayed until the sun set, until the memorial wall disappeared into shadow. Then she went back to her quarters, grabbed her packed duffel, and headed for the airfield. A black helicopter was waiting, rotors already turning. No markings, no identification. Just a crew chief in a flight suit who checked her ID and waved her aboard. The interior was empty except for jump seats and cargo netting. No windows. No way to know where they were going. Aria strapped in as the helicopter lifted off. Through the open door, she watched the base shrink below, the lights, the buildings, the memorial wall now just a dark rectangle against the sand. Everything she'd known, everything she'd been, disappearing into the night. The crew chief handed her a headset. Flight time is 4 hours. There's water in the cooler. We don't talk during transit. Understood. He nodded and turned away, leaving her alone with the engine noise and her thoughts. 4 hours to wherever. 4 hours to prepare for a life that wouldn't officially exist. Aria leaned back against the vibrating metal wall and closed her eyes. Not sleeping, just thinking. About her grandfather, about the valley, about the 12 men who were alive because she'd trusted her instincts over orders, about the targets waiting in the dark, unaware that precision had just been weaponized against them, and about the girl from Wyoming who'd learned to see the wind, who'd been underestimated her entire life, who'd finally found a place where being dangerous wasn't a liability. It was the mission. The helicopter banked hard, changing direction. Aria opened her eyes but saw only darkness through the door. Somewhere below, the world continued spinning. Wars were being fought. Soldiers were dying. Targets were plotting. And Aria Vale was disappearing into the machinery designed to stop them. No name, no record, no limits. Just a rifle, a mission, and the certainty that some people needed to die so others could live. The space between rules and survival had always been narrow. She'd just learned how to walk that line without falling. The helicopter touched down on an airstrip that didn't exist on any map. Aria stepped out into pre-dawn darkness, the rotor wash whipping her hair across her face. The air tasted different here, salt and diesel and something else. Humidity. They were near water. A figure approached from the shadows. Male, late 40s, wearing civilian clothes that screamed contractor. He didn't salute, didn't introduce himself. This way. She followed him across the tarmac to a nondescript building that could have been a warehouse or a hangar. Inside, fluorescent lights revealed a space that was definitely neither. Rows of computer stations, satellite feeds on wall-mounted screens, a weapons locker that would make most special forces units jealous, and 6 people who stopped what they were doing to watch her enter. "New meat?" someone muttered. The contractor led her to a conference room where 2 men waited. One was the SEAL commander from Building 7, Commander Hayes, according to the name tape he wasn't wearing before. The other was younger, maybe 30, with the kind of face that had seen too much too soon. "Sergeant Vale, welcome to Emerald City," Hayes said. "That's not the real name. There is no real name, but it's what we call home." Aria set down her duffel. "Where are we?" "Classified location, allied nation. That's all you need to know." Hayes gestured to the younger man. "This is Caleb Reed. He'll be your handler." Reed extended his hand. His grip was firm, but his eyes were calculating, already measuring her against some internal metric. "You'll answer to me," Reed said. "I coordinate your missions, provide intel, extract you when things go sideways. You do the shooting. I do the thinking. Clear?" "Crystal." "Good." He pulled out a tablet, swiped through files. "Your first target is active in 48 hours, Syrian border region. High-value weapons smuggler named Karim al-Rashid. He's been funneling advanced munitions to insurgent groups across 3 countries. 12 confirmed attacks traced back to his network. Body counts over 200. Aria studied the photo on the screen. Al-Rashid was in his 50s, well-dressed, smiling at some kind of social gathering. He looked like a businessman. "What's the coverage?" "Heavy. He travels with 6-man security detail, all former Syrian army. Lives in a compound with reinforced walls and limited access points." Reed zoomed in on satellite imagery. Traditional hit would require a full team. We're sending you. Alone? That's the point of this program. Hayes leaned forward. You're a scalpel, not a hammer. You go in, take the shot, disappear. No backup, no support. Just you and your rifle. What if the intel's wrong? Then you abort and we try again. Reed's voice was flat. But the intel won't be wrong. We've been tracking al-Rashid for 3 months. His patterns are locked. He visits a specific cafe every Thursday morning. Same table, same security setup. You'll have one window, approximately 45 seconds. Aria processed the information. One shot, 45 seconds. No margin for error. Rules of engagement? Eliminate the target, minimize collateral damage, don't get caught. Hayes stood. You'll have 24 hours to prep. Reed will provide detailed briefings. Equipment's in the armory. Pick what you need. Questions? Just one. Aria met his eyes. If this goes wrong, what happens to me? Hayes didn't blink. We deny everything. You become a rogue operative. The agency disavows knowledge. The military claims you went AWOL and you spend the rest of your life in a foreign prison. Understood. Then get to work. The next 24 hours were brutal. Reed walked her through every detail. Al-Rashid's schedule, his security protocols, the compound layout, the cafe's geography. She memorized building heights, wind patterns, civilian traffic patterns, studied photos until she could identify al-Rashid's bodyguards by silhouette alone. The armory yielded a rifle she'd never seen before, an Accuracy International AX-50 chambered in .50 BMG. Longer range than her M2010, more stopping power. The kind of weapon designed for targets behind armor or cover. You expecting trouble? She asked the armorer, a grizzled man with burn scars on his forearms. Always expect trouble. He handed her a suppressor. This'll tame the signature but won't eliminate it. You'll have maybe 90 seconds after the shot before security converges on your position. 2 minutes if you're lucky. How long for extraction? Reed'll have a vehicle staged 3 blocks away. If you can reach it, you're golden. If not, he shrugged. Aria spent hours zeroing the rifle, learning its quirks. The trigger brake was cleaner than her M2010. The recoil was manageable with the muzzle brake. At 800 meters, she was grouping shots within a 2-inch circle, but the real test would come with variables she couldn't control. The night before deployment, she found herself alone in the barracks, a Spartan room with 6 bunks, most unoccupied. The other operators were either deployed or avoiding her. The new person was always suspect until they proved themselves. Reed found her cleaning the AX-50 for the 3rd time. Nervous? Prepared. He sat on the bunk across from her. You know what the failure rate is for first-time solo operations? No. 40%. Most operators freeze when they realize there's no backup. No team, just them and the target. Aria continued running the cleaning rod through the barrel. You trying to shake my confidence? I'm trying to make sure you understand what you signed up for. Reed's voice softened slightly. Tomorrow, you'll be alone in a hostile city with 1 shot to take out a target surrounded by professionals who've kept him alive for 5 years. The odds aren't great. Odds never are. True. He stood. But for what it's worth, Hayes wouldn't have recruited you if he didn't think you could handle it. The Valley operation impressed a lot of people. The Valley operation could have gone sideways a dozen different ways. But it didn't, because you made the right calls under pressure. Reed moved toward the door. That's what this job is. Making impossible calls and living with the results. You've already proven you can do that. He left before she could respond. Aria finished cleaning the rifle, then lay back on the bunk and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere in Syria, Karim al-Rashid was sleeping peacefully, unaware that his Thursday morning cafe visit would be his last. And somewhere in this nameless facility, 6 other operators were probably running missions just like hers, solo operations in the dark, taking shots that would never be acknowledged, removing people who would never be mourned. She thought about her grandfather's warning, about becoming cruel, about the space between necessary and acceptable. Then she thought about the 200 people al-Rashid's weapons had killed. Civilians, mostly. Market bombings, roadside attacks, the kind of violence designed to maximize terror. The math was simple. 1 life for 200. She could live with that math. The insertion was textbook. A local asset drove her into the city in a delivery van, dropped her at a prearranged building 4 blocks from the cafe. She climbed 6 flights of stairs in the dark, emerged onto a rooftop that gave her a perfect sightline. Range, 742 meters. Elevation advantage, 67 feet. Wind, light, variable, 3 to 5 miles per hour. She set up the rifle, confirmed the 0, and waited. The city woke slowly around her. Calls to prayer echoed from minarets. Traffic built on the streets below. Shopkeepers rolled up metal shutters. Life continued, indifferent to what was about to happen. At 0847, al-Rashid's convoy arrived. 3 black SUVs moving in formation. They parked outside the cafe. 6 bodyguards emerged first, scanning the area with professional paranoia. Then al-Rashid himself, dressed in an expensive suit, moving with the confidence of a man who'd survived countless threats. Through the scope, Aria could see his face clearly. He was smiling, saying something to one of his guards. The man laughed. They looked human. She pushed the thought away and focused on the mechanics. Al-Rashid entered the cafe. His guards took positions, 2 at the door, 4 scanning the perimeter. Standard diamond formation. The cafe had large windows. She could see al-Rashid inside, sitting at his usual table. A waiter approached. Al-Rashid ordered without looking at the menu. Routine. Predictable. Fatal. Aria controlled her breathing. The morning sun was warming the rooftop, creating thermals that would affect the bullet's trajectory. She adjusted her elevation slightly. Wind was steady now, 4 miles per hour, left to right. Al-Rashid's coffee arrived. He took a sip, set down the cup, pulled out his phone. This was the window. Aria settled the crosshairs on his chest. Center mass, accounting for the cafe window's refraction. The glass would slow the bullet slightly, but not enough to matter at this range. Her finger moved from the trigger guard to the trigger. 1 shot. That's when the child ran into frame. A boy, maybe 8 years old, chasing a soccer ball across the cafe's outdoor seating area. He stopped directly in front of al-Rashid's window, retrieving the ball from under a table. Aria's finger froze. The boy was in her line of fire. Not directly, but close enough that if the window glass deflected the bullet even slightly, if her calculation was off by inches, al-Rashid stood up. The window of opportunity was closing. The boy grabbed his ball and started to run back. Aria's training screamed at her, "Take the shot!" The boy was moving out of the frame. Al-Rashid was stationary. 3 seconds, maybe 4. But if the bullet fragmented on the glass, al-Rashid turned toward the door. The boy cleared the frame. Aria fired. The AX-50 roared despite the suppressor. The recoil was massive, driving into her shoulder like a hammer. Through the scope, she watched the .50 caliber round cross the distance in less than a second. The cafe window exploded. Al-Rashid's chest erupted in red. He was thrown backward, crashed into the wall behind him, and slid down, leaving a smear of blood. The guards reacted instantly. Weapons up, scanning for the shooter. Civilians screamed and scattered. The boy with the soccer ball stood frozen, staring at the shattered window. Aria was already moving. She broke down the rifle in 15 seconds, a speed drill she'd practiced until her fingers bled. Packed everything into a backpack, slung it over her shoulder. Voices shouted from the street below. Engines roared to life. She hit the stairwell at a run, taking steps 3 at a time. 6 flights down. Her heart rate was elevated but controlled. Adrenaline sharpened everything. On the 3rd floor, she heard footsteps below, someone coming up. She detoured through a hallway, found a window, risked a glance outside. 2 of al-Rashid's guards were entering the building. They'd triangulated her position faster than expected. Professional. Aria kept moving. Found a second stairwell on the building's opposite side. Descended fast but quiet. Emerged into an alley 2 blocks from the cafe. The extraction vehicle, a beat-up sedan, was idling where Reed had promised. She opened the door, slid inside. The driver didn't speak, just pulled into traffic. They drove at normal speed, obeying traffic laws, blending into the morning rush. Behind them, sirens wailed. Police, probably. Maybe military. The driver took 3 seemingly random turns, then pulled into an underground parking garage. A second vehicle waited. A delivery truck. They switched vehicles in under 30 seconds. Aria climbed into the back of the truck. The driver sealed the rear doors and they were moving again. She sat in the darkness, listening to the truck's engine, feeling the rifle case against her leg. 1 shot, 1 kill. 0 collateral. The boy with the soccer ball was fine. Al-Rashid wasn't. 200 deaths avenged. The math still worked. But her hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. Not from fear, from the proximity of how wrong it could have gone. If she'd fired 2 seconds earlier, if the boy had stopped to tie his shoe, if the glass had deflected the round 6 inches to the left, she forced the thoughts away and focused on breathing. The truck drove for 40 minutes before stopping. The rear doors opened. Reed stood there, expression neutral. Target confirmed KIA. Extraction clean. No pursuit. He offered his hand to help her out. Welcome to the program, Vale. You're 1 for 1. She took his hand but didn't feel victorious. Back at Emerald City, Hayes was waiting in the operations center. The wall screens showed news footage from Syria. Police cordoning off the cafe, covered bodies being loaded into ambulances, talking heads speculating about gang violence or political assassination. Al-Rashid's network is already scrambling, Hayes said. Without him, the supply chain collapses. You just saved lives that'll never know you existed. Aria set down her rifle case. There was a kid in the frame. I saw the drone feed. You made the right call waiting. If I'd been wrong about the timing, you weren't. Hayes' voice was firm. That's why you're here. Because you can make those calculations under pressure and be right. She wanted to argue, to explain how close it had been, how the margin for error was measured in heartbeats. But operators were filing into the room now, the ones who'd been avoiding her. They were nodding. A few offered quiet congratulations. She'd passed their test. One operator, a stocky man with a Carolina accent, extended his hand. Name's Garrett. Heard you held fire for a civilian. Most rookies would have taken the shot and hoped for the best. I'm not most rookies. No shit. He grinned. You just made the rest of us look bad. Welcome to the Ghost Show. Over the next 6 weeks, Aria ran 4 more operations. A bomb maker in Yemen, a human trafficker in Istanbul, a corrupt government official in Somalia selling weapons to terrorists. Each mission was surgical. Each target was verified. Each shot was clean. She became efficient, detached. The kind of operator who could study a target's face through a scope for hours, learn their habits, watch them interact with their families, and still pull the trigger without hesitation when the moment came. Because the math always worked. 1 life for dozens, sometimes hundreds. The other operators accepted her now. Garrett taught her urban infiltration techniques. A former Delta sniper named Collins shared tricks for reading mirage in desert conditions. Reed gradually gave her more autonomy in mission planning. But something was changing inside her. A calcification. A hardening that she recognized but couldn't stop. She dreamed about targets sometimes. Not nightmares, just memories. The machine gunner in Afghanistan. Al-Rashid slumping against the cafe wall. The trafficker in Istanbul who'd been playing with his daughter 5 minutes before Aria's bullet found him. She didn't feel guilty. That wasn't the problem. The problem was she didn't feel anything at all. Then came the mission that broke the pattern. Reed called her into the briefing room on a Tuesday morning. His expression was different, tense. New target. Priority level is off the charts. He pulled up a photo on the screen. The man in the picture was American. Late 30s, fit, wearing a suit. He looked like he could have been military. Name's Marcus Webb, former CIA case officer. He went rogue 6 months ago, selling classified intelligence to the highest bidder. His last sale compromised 3 deep cover assets. All 3 are dead now. Aria studied the photo. He's American. Was American. The moment he sold out his own people, he forfeited that. Reed swiped to another image, surveillance footage of Webb meeting with known arms dealers. He's currently in Prague. We've tracked him to a luxury hotel. He thinks he's safe. Thinks his former employer won't touch him on Allied soil. They won't, but we will. Exactly. Reed zoomed in on the hotel. You'll have a 12-hour window. Webb's scheduled to meet another buyer in his suite. The buyer arrives at 2100 hours. You need to take Webb before then. Interior shot? Affirmative. The suite has floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river. You'll have a position across the water. Range is just under 900 meters. Aria processed the variables. Night shot. Urban environment. Moving target inside a lit room, glass barrier, potential collateral if the buyer arrived early. What's the authorization level? Reed met her eyes. Presidential. Webb's intel sales have jeopardized national security at the highest level. This is a sanctioned kill. She'd killed enemy combatants, terrorists, criminals, but never an American. Problem? Hayes's voice came from the doorway. He'd been listening. No, sir? Good, because Webb's next sale could get a lot of Americans killed. He's selling the locations of forward operating bases in active combat zones. If that intel reaches the wrong hands, I understand. Do you? Hayes stepped into the room. Because this isn't some foreign insurgent. This is one of our own. Someone who wore the uniform, swore the oath, and then decided money was worth more than lives. Aria thought about the operators she'd met. Garrett, Collins, the others whose names she didn't know but whose faces she'd remember. Any one of them could be at those bases Webb was compromising. The math still worked. One traitor for dozens of soldiers. When do I leave? 6 hours. Prague was colder than Syria. Aria set up her position in an abandoned office building across the Vltava River, the kind of structure slated for demolition but caught in bureaucratic limbo. The room she chose had been someone's workspace once. There were still papers scattered across desks, a forgotten coffee mug on a windowsill. Now it was a sniper hide. She assembled the rifle, a different weapon this time, a Barrett MRAD configured for urban operations. The suppressor was longer, designed to minimize acoustic signature in an environment where sound carried unpredictably. Range to target, 873 meters. The hotel suite was lit, curtains open. Webb moved around inside, confident, relaxed. Through the scope, Aria could see him clearly. He was on the phone, gesturing as he talked, laughing at something. He looked nothing like a traitor, just a businessman enjoying an expensive hotel room. She checked her watch. 37 hours, 23 minutes until the buyer arrived. Wind was tricky here. The river created updrafts and eddies that shifted every few minutes. She'd have to time the shot perfectly. Webb poured himself a drink from the minibar. Scotch, probably. He raised the glass in a mock toast to someone on the phone. Aria settled the crosshairs on his chest, controlled her breathing, waited for the wind to settle. That's when she noticed the photo on the nightstand. Through the powerful scope, she could see it clearly. Webb with a woman and 2 children. Family photo. The kids were young, 8 and 10 maybe. She pushed the thought away. Traitors had families too. That didn't change what he'd done. Webb ended his call, set down the phone, moved toward the window, perfect position, stationary target, clear shot. Aria's finger moved to the trigger. Webb stood there, looking out at the city, at the river, at the lights reflecting on the water. She wondered if he knew, if some instinct was warning him that death was aimed at his heart from across the river. Probably not. Traitors never thought they'd face consequences. The wind settled. 3 seconds of perfect calm. This was the window. Aria fired. The rifle's recoil was brutal even with the suppressor. The muzzle flash was barely visible in the darkness. The bullet crossed the river in 1.2 seconds. Webb's chest exploded. The window behind him shattered. He dropped instantly, dead before his brain registered the impact. Aria chambered another round by reflex, scanning for threats. The hotel suite was chaos visible through the scope, alarms triggered by the broken window, staff rushing toward the room. She was already packing, 30 seconds to break down the rifle. 45 to clear the building. The extraction vehicle was waiting 2 blocks away. A local asset who asked no questions and drove like he knew the streets by muscle memory. They were across the border into Germany within 3 hours. Aria sat in the safe house afterwards, staring at her hands, still steady, always steady. But something felt different this time. Webb had been an American, a traitor, yes, but someone who'd sworn the same oath she had, worn the same uniform, and she'd killed him without hesitation. Reed arrived the next morning with confirmation. Webb's death is being reported as a targeted hit by Russian intelligence. The buyer never showed. He probably knew something was wrong. Good work. How long until the next one? Reed studied her. You need downtime? I need to stay busy. He nodded slowly. There's always another mission, always another target. That's the nature of this work. Good. Because staying busy meant not thinking, not calculating, not wondering when the math would stop making sense, not asking herself how many shots it would take before she became exactly what Moss had warned about. A weapon without a conscience. A soldier who'd crossed so far into the shadows that the light didn't reach anymore. But those were questions for later. Right now there was another target, another mission. Another equation that ended with one person dead so others could live. Aria Vale was 1 for 6 now. And somewhere in the world, target number 7 was going about their life, completely unaware that their days had just become numbered. The countdown clock was ticking, and she was the only one who could hear it. Target number 7 never came. 3 weeks after Prague, Aria sat in the empty briefing room waiting for Reed to assign the next mission. He was late. 20 minutes, then 40. She cleaned her sidearm twice just to have something to do with her hands. When Reed finally arrived, he wasn't alone. Hayes followed him in, along with a woman Aria had never seen before. Mid-50s, gray hair pulled back tight, wearing a pantsuit that screamed senior intelligence officer. Sergeant Vale, this is Deputy Director Catherine Marsh, Hayes said. CIA Special Activities Division. Marsh didn't offer her hand, just sat down across from Aria and opened a tablet. 14 weeks in the program, 7 missions, 7 confirmed kills, 0 collateral damage. Marsh looked up. Impressive record. Thank you, ma'am. It wasn't a compliment. Marsh swiped through files on her screen. It's a red flag. Aria's jaw tightened. I don't understand. A 7 for 7 is statistically improbable. Even our best operators miss occasionally. Bad intel, timing issues, unforeseen variables. Marsh leaned forward. But you? Perfect execution every time, which means either you're the best sniper in modern military history or you're taking unnecessary risks to maintain a perfect record. I follow protocols. Every mission is vetted. The Prague operation wasn't vetted by me. Marsh's voice was sharp. Marcus Webb was a high-value target, yes. But the authorization to eliminate him on foreign soil without host nation approval? That came from somewhere above my clearance level. And now I'm being asked to explain why we assassinated an American citizen in a NATO country. Hayes spoke up. Webb was a traitor. He compromised. I know what he was. Marsh cut him off. But there are processes, legal frameworks, even for black operations. And this program seems to think it's exempt from all of them. She turned back to Aria. Tell me about the shot. Walk me through your decision-making. Aria kept her voice level. Target was in a lit room. Range was 873 meters. Wind conditions were variable but manageable. I waited for optimal conditions and took the shot. Target was eliminated. No collateral damage. You didn't hesitate? Didn't question the order? No, ma'am. Why not? Because Webb's intel sales were getting Americans killed. The math worked. Marsh's expression darkened. The math worked. That's how you justify killing a U.S. citizen? That's how I justify stopping a traitor from causing more deaths. The room went silent. Reed shifted uncomfortably. Hayes's face was unreadable. Marsh closed her tablet. You're being rotated out of active operations pending a full review. What? This program operates in a legal gray zone at best. When it starts making headlines, and Prague is making headlines, people ask questions. Questions I can't answer without exposing methods and sources we can't afford to lose. She stood. You're grounded until further notice. Hayes started to object. Deputy Director, Vale's performance has been flawless. I know, that's exactly the problem. Marsh headed for the door. Perfect soldiers make terrible liabilities when something inevitably goes wrong. She left. The door closed with a finality that echoed through the room. Reed broke the silence first. She's cleaning house. Webb's death triggered a congressional inquiry. They're looking for scapegoats. Let them look, Hayes said. Vale was following orders, legitimate orders. Were they? Aria heard herself say. Both men turned to look at her. Were they legitimate? Or did we just decide Webb deserved to die and worked backward from there? Hayes's expression hardened. You having second thoughts, Sergeant? I'm having first thoughts. Aria stood. I've spent 3 months killing people based on files and photos, following orders without question because I trusted the system. But if the system is compromised, the system isn't compromised, it's being scrutinized. There's a difference. Hayes moved closer. You did your job. You did it well. Don't let some bureaucrat make you doubt that. But the doubt was already there, growing like a crack in glass. Aria spent the next 2 days in limbo. No missions, no briefings, just endless hours in the barracks, while other operators deployed and returned. Garrett tried to talk to her once, but she wasn't interested in platitudes. On the third day, Reed found her on the range, putting rounds through paper targets at 600 meters. You're shooting angry, he observed. I'm shooting fine. Your groups are off by half an inch. That's angry for you. He waited until she lowered the rifle. Marsh pulled your file, every mission you've run. She's looking for patterns. What kind of patterns? The kind that suggest you're not following protocols. Reed hesitated. She's also pulled your service record from before the program. Your psych evals. The incident in Afghanistan. The Valley. Of course. I was cleared for that operation. Officially, yes. But the psych evaluation noted concerning tendencies. Specifically, a willingness to prioritize outcomes over orders. Reed sat on the shooting bench. Marsh thinks you're a cowboy, someone who will do whatever she thinks is right, regardless of the rules. She's not wrong. Reed looked at her sharply. That's not something you should admit out loud. Why not? It's true. Aria started breaking down the rifle. I saved 12 men by disobeying orders, got recruited into a program that wanted exactly that quality, and now I'm being punished because I'm too good at what they trained me to do. You're being investigated because someone needs a fall guy for Prague. If Marsh can prove you went rogue, it protects everyone above you in the chain of command. So I'm expendable. Everyone's expendable. That's the job. Reed stood. But you're not going down without a fight. Hayes is calling in favors. We're pushing back on the review. Don't. What? Aria finished packing the rifle case. Don't push back. If they want to review my operations, let them. Because either the kills were justified or they weren't. And if they weren't, I shouldn't be doing this anyway. Reed stared at her like she'd grown a second head. You're seriously okay with ending your career? I'm okay with knowing whether I'm a soldier or a murderer. She walked away before he could respond. That night, alone in the barracks, Aria pulled out her phone and scrolled through the photos she'd kept from her grandfather. The ranch. The old rifle. His weathered hands teaching her to see the wind. She found the last photo taken before he died. Him in the hospice bed, skeletal and exhausted, but still managing a smile. The space between, she whispered to the empty room. You said I'd find myself there. But what if I can't tell which side I'm on anymore? The phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Meet me at the North Perimeter Fence. 0200 hours. Come alone. M.M. Moss. It had been months since she'd seen him. Aria checked the time. 0147. She grabbed her jacket and headed out. The North Perimeter was the least monitored section of the facility, a chain-link fence separating the compound from empty scrubland. Security cameras covered the approach, but there were blind spots if you knew where to look. She found Moss waiting in one of those blind spots, leaning against a utility pole. You look like hell, he said by way of greeting. Feeling it too. Heard you're under review. Word travels fast in the community. He pulled out a cigarette, offered her one. She declined. Also heard you've been running solo black ops for 3 months, taking out targets without backup. That's classified. Everything's classified until someone decides it isn't. Moss lit his cigarette. I've got a friend in the intelligence community. She mentioned a sniper hitting impossibly clean shots across multiple theaters. 7 for 7. Only one person I know shoots like that. Aria said nothing. So here's my question, Moss continued. Are you doing this because you believe in it? Or because it's the only thing you're good at? The question hit harder than it should have. Both, she admitted. The targets were legitimate. People who needed to die. Needed according to who? According to the intelligence, the files, the evidence. And you trust that evidence? She hesitated. I did. Moss took a long drag on his cigarette. You remember McKinney? Kid from my squad who died on that IED patrol? Yeah. I blamed myself for months, followed the route I was ordered to take, and he died. But you know what I learned? Even if I'd broken protocol and gone a different way, something else could have killed him. Different IED, sniper. Ambush. You can't control everything, Vale. You can only control your choices in the moment. That's not helpful. It's not supposed to be helpful. It's supposed to be true. He flicked ash from his cigarette. You're being investigated because you're too good at a job that shouldn't exist. And now you're questioning whether the people who gave you that job are trustworthy. Are they? Hell if I know. But I know you, and I know you wouldn't have taken 7 shots unless you believed they needed to be taken. Moss met her eyes. The question is whether you still believe it. Aria thought about al-Rashid, the trafficker. Webb, 7 faces she'd seen through a scope. 7 lives ended by her finger on a trigger. I don't know anymore, she said quietly. Then figure it out. Because when Marsh's investigation concludes, you'll have to defend every one of those kills. And if you can't look her in the eye and say they were justified, you're finished. He dropped the cigarette, crushed it under his boot. I've got to go. Came here to tell you one thing. Whatever you decide, make sure it's your choice. Not Hayes's. Not the program's. Yours. Why do you care? Moss smiled slightly. Because you reminded me what it looks like when someone gives a damn, even when it costs them everything. He started walking away, then stopped. Oh, and Vale? That Valley operation? Those 12 guys you saved? They've been asking about you. Wanted me to tell you they're still alive because you made the hard call. Remember that when you're drowning in doubt. He disappeared into the darkness, leaving Aria alone with her thoughts and the distant hum of generators. The review board convened 4 days later in a secure conference room that smelled like stale coffee and legal anxiety. 5 people sat across from Aria. Deputy Director Marsh, 2 Pentagon officials she didn't recognize, a JAG officer, and Hayes, who technically wasn't supposed to be there, but had inserted himself anyway. Marsh opened a folder. Sergeant Vale, this review will cover all 7 operations conducted under the classified program designated Emerald City. For the record, this is not a court-martial. However, your testimony may be used in subsequent legal proceedings. The JAG officer, a colonel named Patterson, leaned forward. Let's start with Afghanistan. The Valley operation. You fired 8 rounds in violation of direct orders to observe only. Walk us through your decision-making process. Aria had prepared for this. The ODA team was pinned by superior forces. QRF was 40 minutes out. They had maybe 5 minutes before being overrun. I assessed the situation and determined that engaging hostile forces was necessary to prevent mass casualties. You assessed, Marsh repeated, not your commanding officer. You. Yes, ma'am. I was the only one with eyes on target. And you decided 12 American lives were worth more than following orders? I decided 12 American lives were worth saving. Period. One of the Pentagon officials spoke up, a man with silver hair and too many ribbons on his service uniform. Sergeant, you understand that combat operations require strict adherence to rules of engagement. Without that structure, we descend into chaos. With all due respect, sir, those rules are written by people who aren't watching soldiers die in real time. That's exactly the kind of attitude that concerns us, Marsh interjected. A willingness to substitute your judgment for the entire chain of command. Hayes cleared his throat. Deputy Director, if I may, Sergeant Vale's actions in Afghanistan saved 12 lives and disrupted a planned Taliban offensive. The mission was a tactical success. I'm not disputing the outcome, Commander. I'm questioning the process. Marsh turned back to Aria. Let's move to your operations under Emerald City. Mission 1, Karim al-Rashid in Syria. You had a child enter your line of fire and delayed your shot. Why? Because killing al-Rashid wasn't worth hitting a civilian. But you took the shot anyway. What changed? The child moved. The window was clear. And if the child hadn't moved? If your 45-second window had closed? Aria met Marsh's eyes. Then I would have aborted and waited for another opportunity. Even though delaying might have allowed al-Rashid to slip away? Yes. Marsh made a note. Mission 6, Marcus Webb in Prague. Former CIA officer. American citizen. You eliminated him in a NATO country without host nation notification. Explain your authorization for that action. I was ordered to take the shot by my handler. The target was verified as a high-value threat. I executed the mission as instructed. Did you question the order? No, ma'am. Why not? Because Webb's intelligence sales were actively endangering American personnel. The threat was immediate and verified. Patterson, the JAG officer, spoke up. Verified by whom? What evidence did you personally review before killing an American citizen? The question landed like a punch. Aria realized with cold clarity that she'd never actually seen the evidence. Just Reed's briefings, photos, files that could have been fabricated. I trusted my handler's intelligence, she said slowly. So you took someone's word that Webb deserved execution? I took my chain of command's word that the target was legitimate. That's not the same thing, Sergeant. No, it wasn't. Marsh leaned back. Here's what concerns me. You've demonstrated a pattern of making life and death decisions based on your personal assessment of situations. Sometimes that works in our favor, like Afghanistan. Sometimes it creates international incidents, like Prague. But in every case, you're making calls that should require higher authorization. That's literally what the program trained me to do. The program, Marsh said carefully, was designed to handle targets where traditional approval processes were too slow. It was not designed to give snipers carte blanche to eliminate anyone they deemed a threat. I never eliminated anyone I deemed a threat. I eliminated targets designated by intelligence professionals. Intelligence professionals who may have had their own agendas. Marsh closed her folder. We've been reviewing the entire Emerald City operation. Several targets now appear to have been designated based on questionable intelligence. Al-Rashid, for instance, may have been a business rival of a CIA asset, not actually a weapons smuggler. The room tilted slightly. That's not possible, Aria said. It's not confirmed, but it's possible. Marsh's expression was grave. Which means you may have killed people based on fabricated intelligence. Hayes slammed his hand on the table. That's an unproven allegation, and you know it. Every target was vetted through multiple channels. Channels that are now under investigation themselves. Marsh stood. This review is suspended pending a full audit of all Emerald City operations. Sergeant Vale, you are hereby relieved of duty and confined to this facility until further notice. Your weapons are to be surrendered immediately. You're making her a prisoner? Hayes was on his feet now. She followed orders. Illegal orders, potentially, and if that's the case, everyone involved in this program is complicit. Marsh looked at Aria. I'm sorry, Sergeant, but until we determine the truth, you're a liability we can't afford. 2 MPs entered the room. Aria stood slowly, maintaining her composure even as everything collapsed around her. She'd killed 7 people, and at least one of them might have been innocent. The holding room wasn't a cell, exactly, more like a guest quarters with locks on the outside. A bed, a desk, a small bathroom. No windows, no weapons, no contact with the outside world. Aria sat on the bed and tried to process what had just happened. Al-Rashid might have been innocent. The files could have been fabricated. She'd trusted the intelligence without question and killed a man who might have been nothing more than a business competitor someone wanted eliminated. The math didn't work anymore. She thought about the photo she'd seen through the scope. Webb with his family, his children. If he'd been guilty, his death was justice. If he'd been innocent, she couldn't finish the thought. A knock on the door interrupted her spiral. It opened to reveal Reed looking haggard. 5 minutes, he said. That's all they'd give me. You shouldn't be here. Probably not. He sat in the desk chair. Hayes is fighting this, calling in every favor he has. But Marsh has Pentagon backing. She's going to dismantle the entire program. Maybe she should. Reed looked at her sharply. You don't mean that. Don't I? We've been running around the world killing people based on intelligence we never verified, just trusting that the files were accurate, that the targets deserved to die. Aria's voice was flat. What if they didn't? Then we made mistakes, but that doesn't invalidate the entire operation. Doesn't it? She stood, paced the small room. I thought I was saving lives, removing threats. But if even one of those targets was fabricated, I'm just a killer. A weapon pointed by people with agendas I don't understand. You're a soldier following orders. That's not good enough anymore. She turned to face him. I need to know the truth about those targets. All of them. Starting with Al-Rashid. Reed hesitated. The files are classified above my level now. Marsh locked everything down. Then find someone who can access them, because if I killed innocent people, I need to know. And if I didn't, I need proof. He studied her for a long moment. You know, if the intel turns out to be solid, Marsh will still crucify you. She needs someone to blame for Prague. I can live with being blamed for killing guilty people. I can't live with the alternative. Reed nodded slowly. I'll see what I can do. But Vale? If the files are dirty and we can prove it, then a lot of people go down. I know. Including Hayes, he approved every mission. Aria thought about the commander who'd recruited her, who'd believed in her, who'd given her purpose when she'd felt directionless. If he put me on fabricated targets, he deserves whatever he gets. Reed left without another word. Aria sat back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere above her, in offices and conference rooms she'd never see, her fate was being decided by people she'd never meet. But the only opinion that mattered was her own. Had she done the right thing? She'd followed orders, trusted the system, pulled the trigger when ordered. But her grandfather's voice echoed in her memory. Being accurate isn't the hard part. Knowing when to pull the trigger, that's what costs you. She'd pulled the trigger 7 times. Now she had to live with not knowing if those 7 deaths were justice or murder. The wait lasted 3 days. 3 days of isolation, of second-guessing every shot, of mentally reviewing every file and wondering what had been real and what had been manufactured. On the 3rd night, Reed returned. He looked worse, unshaven, exhausted, but there was something sharp in his eyes. I found someone, he said quietly. A CIA analyst who worked on the Emerald City intel packages. She's willing to talk, off the record. Why would she risk that? Because she thinks the program was compromised, and she doesn't want to go down with it. Reed handed her a tablet. This is everything she could pull before Marsh locked her out. Read it, all of it. Aria took the tablet. The screen showed a directory of files, each one corresponding to a mission she'd run. She opened the first one, Al-Rashid. What she read made her stomach turn. Al-Rashid had been a weapons dealer. That part was true. But the intelligence linking him to the specific attacks listed in her briefing was circumstantial at best. Hearsay from a single source who turned out to be a business competitor. The 200 deaths attributed to his network? Possibly fabricated. Real attacks, but no solid evidence Al-Rashid had supplied the weapons. She'd killed a man based on maybes. The next file was worse. The trafficker in Istanbul had been guilty. That checked out. But the official who'd ordered his elimination had financial ties to the trafficker's competitors. Mission after mission, the pattern emerged. Real criminals? Yes. But targets selected not just for their crimes, but for who benefited from their deaths. Except Webb. His file was clean. Legitimate traitor. Verified intelligence sales. Confirmed deaths of American assets. She'd killed 1 genuinely guilty target out of 7. The math worked in reverse now. 6 questionable kills for 1 legitimate threat. Aria set down the tablet, feeling sick. There's more, Reed said quietly. Hayes knew. Not about all of it, but he suspected the intel was compromised. He kept approving missions because shutting down the program would have exposed everyone involved. Including him. Including him. She looked at Reed. And you? I ran the missions you were assigned, but I didn't select the targets. That came from higher up. He ran a hand through his hair. For what it's worth, I believe the intelligence was solid. I wouldn't have sent you after fabricated targets. But you did. Yeah, I did. They sat in silence for a moment. What happens now? Aria finally asked. Marsh gets this evidence, the program collapses, Hayes gets court-martialed, maybe prison. Everyone involved gets burned. Reed met her eyes. Including you. I can live with that. Can you? Because Marsh isn't going to distinguish between willing participants and soldiers following orders. You'll be the face of this scandal, the sniper who killed on questionable intel. Your career ends, probably your freedom too. Aria thought about the valley, about the 12 men she'd saved by trusting her instincts. Then she thought about Al-Rashid. About killing a man who might have been guilty, might have been innocent, and having no way to know for certain. My grandfather told me the hardest shots aren't the long ones, she said quietly. They're the ones where you have to decide if the target deserves to die. I've been making that decision based on files and photos, trusting other people's judgment instead of my own. What else could you do? Exactly what I should have done from the beginning. verify the intelligence myself, question the orders, make sure the math actually worked before pulling the trigger. She stood, made her decision. Give the files to Marsh, all of them. Let her burn down the program. Reed looked stunned. You're serious? Completely. Because if I don't, more snipers like me will end up killing more targets like al-Rashid, and eventually someone innocent will die if they haven't already. You'll go to prison. Maybe. But at least I'll know I stopped it from happening again. She handed back the tablet. Do it. Tonight. Reed took the tablet, studied her face like he was seeing her for the first time. You know, most operators would cover their ass. Delete the evidence, blame the dead. I'm not most operators. No. He smiled slightly. You're really not. He left. The door locked behind him. Aria sat back on the bed and waited for the consequences she'd just chosen. Because her grandfather had been right about everything except one thing. The space between necessary and cruel wasn't where you found yourself. It was where you proved who you'd already become. And Aria Vale had just proven she was still a soldier. Not a weapon, not a killer. A soldier who'd made mistakes but would own them. Who'd followed bad orders but would face the consequences. Who'd pulled 7 triggers and would spend the rest of her life making sure it meant something. Outside her locked door, the machinery of justice was already grinding forward. Inside, she was finally at peace. The evidence hit Marsh's desk at 0400 hours. By 0600, Emerald City was in lockdown. MPs flooded the compound, sealing exits, confiscating equipment, detaining personnel. Aria heard it all from her locked room. Boots in hallways shouted orders, the mechanical sound of hard drives being removed and tagged as evidence. Reed had done exactly what she'd asked. Now the consequences were rolling in like a storm. The door opened at 0723. 2 MPs, professional and silent. They escorted her through corridors now crawling with investigators. Operators she'd trained with were being questioned in separate rooms. Garrett caught her eye as she passed. He looked confused, betrayed. She didn't blame him. The interrogation room was smaller than the review board chamber. Just Marsh, Patterson, the JAG officer, and a recording device on the table between them. Marsh looked like she hadn't slept. Sergeant Vale, you're being questioned under Article 31 of the UCMJ. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in a court-martial. Do you understand these rights? Yes, ma'am. Do you wish to have legal counsel present? No, ma'am. Patterson frowned. Sergeant, I strongly advise, I don't need a lawyer. I need to tell the truth. Aria sat down. The files Reed gave you, they're accurate? Marsh studied her carefully. Preliminary analysis suggests they are. Multiple missions were authorized based on intelligence that appears to have been manipulated or fabricated outright. How many? 6 out of 7. The number landed like a physical blow, even though she'd expected it. The analyst who provided these files, Marsh continued, claimed she raised concerns about source reliability months ago. Her warnings were ignored by program leadership. She paused. Specifically, by Commander Hayes. Where is he now? In custody, along with 3 other senior officers connected to target selection. Marsh leaned forward. I need you to walk me through every mission, every briefing, every piece of intelligence you were shown before pulling the trigger. So Aria did. She started with al-Rashid, described the files Reed had shown her, the satellite imagery, the supposed evidence linking him to attacks. Then the Istanbul trafficker, the Somali official, all the way through to Webb in Prague. She spoke for 2 hours without stopping, recounting every detail she could remember. Patterson took notes. Marsh asked pointed questions. The recording device captured everything. When she finished, her throat was raw. One question, Marsh said. Why did you give us the evidence? You could have destroyed it, protected yourself and the program. Because protecting the program meant more snipers would end up where I am, wondering if they'd killed innocent people, living with doubt they could never resolve. Aria met Marsh's eyes. I'd rather face a court-martial knowing I stopped it than walk free knowing I let it continue. Marsh sat back. Most operators don't think that way. I'm not most operators. No, you're not. Marsh glanced at Patterson, some unspoken communication passing between them. Sergeant Vale, based on your testimony and the evidence provided, We're prepared to offer you immunity from prosecution in exchange for your full cooperation in the investigation. Aria blinked. What? You were following orders based on intelligence you had no ability to verify independently. While that doesn't absolve you of responsibility, it does mitigate culpability. Patterson slid a document across the table. This is a cooperation agreement. You testify against Hayes and the others involved in intelligence fabrication, and we recommend no charges be filed against you. What about the families, the people I killed? That's beyond the scope of this investigation, Marsh said carefully. Those deaths occurred in combat zones under color of lawful orders. Legally, you're protected by sovereign immunity. Legally, Aria stared at the document. But not morally. Morality isn't my jurisdiction, Sergeant. Justice is. Marsh tapped the agreement. You have 24 hours to decide. Talk to a lawyer. Think it through. But understand this. If you refuse immunity and this goes to court-martial, you'll likely be convicted. Following orders is a defense, but not an absolute one. Aria left the interrogation room with the agreement in her hand and a decision she wasn't ready to make. They moved her to better quarters, still confined, but with a window now. She could see the airfield, watch helicopters come and go. The facility was quieter now. Most of the operators had been transferred out pending the investigation's conclusion. She sat on the bed and read the immunity agreement 3 times. The language was dense, bureaucratic, but the message was clear. Testify against Hayes, and she walked away clean. Career over, probably. Discharged under other than honorable conditions, most likely. But no prison time, no court-martial. All she had to do was blame her commanding officer. A knock on the door. She expected Reed or maybe Patterson checking in. Instead, it was Hayes. He looked smaller somehow, defeated. They'd taken his uniform insignia. He wore a plain green t-shirt and BDU pants. An MP stood outside the door, watching. They're giving you 5 minutes, the MP said. That's it. Hayes entered. The door closed but didn't lock. He sat in the chair across from her bed. Didn't speak for a long moment. I know what they offered you, he finally said. Immunity, if you testify against me. Yeah. You should take it. Aria looked at him sharply. What? You should take it, Hayes repeated. Because you're right. The program was compromised. I suspected the intelligence was dirty months ago, but I kept approving missions because shutting down would have exposed everyone, including you. He exhaled slowly. I put my career ahead of truth. That's on me. You recruited me, believed in me when no one else did. I weaponized you. There's a difference. Hayes leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You know what I realized sitting in that cell? I didn't recruit you because you were exceptional. I recruited you because you were controllable, young, eager to prove yourself, willing to follow orders without asking hard questions. That's not true. Isn't it? Think about it. I found a soldier who'd already demonstrated a willingness to disobey direct orders when she thought it was right. Then I put her in a program where disobeying was encouraged, where questioning was discouraged. I turned your best instinct, moral judgment, into a liability. Aria wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. The Valley operation, Hayes continued, you saved 12 men because you trusted your own assessment over orders. That took courage. But every mission after, you followed my orders without question, trusted my intelligence, killed on my word. He shook his head. I stripped away the very thing that made you valuable and turned you into exactly what Moss warned about, a weapon without a conscience. I had a conscience. I still do. Then use it. Testify. Tell the truth. Let me face what I've earned. Hayes stood. You've spent your whole life fighting to prove you belong, to show you're as good as anyone. You've already done that. Now prove you're better. The MP knocked. Time's up? Hayes moved toward the door, then stopped. For what it's worth, Sergeant, that shot in the valley? That was the best call I've ever seen a soldier make. Everything after was me failing you. He left before she could respond. Aria sat alone, staring at the immunity agreement, thinking about trust and orders and the space between doing what you're told and doing what's right. Her grandfather had tried to teach her that space existed, that finding it was the only way to stay human while carrying a rifle. She'd forgotten. Let the program make decisions for her. Let Hayes' authority replace her own judgment. But she remembered now. She picked up a pen and signed the agreement. The hearings took 3 weeks. Closed sessions in Pentagon conference rooms where Aria testified about every mission, every briefing, every kill. She described Hayes' approval process, Reed's intelligence packages, the pressure to maintain a perfect record. She told the truth without embellishment or excuse. Hayes testified too, took full responsibility, admitted he'd suspected compromised intelligence but proceeded anyway, named senior officials who'd pressured him to approve questionable targets for political reasons. The scandal went deeper than anyone expected. 2 Pentagon officials resigned. A CIA division chief was fired. Congressional committees launched investigations into black operations accountability, and Emerald City was officially disbanded. Aria watched it all from a distance, confined to a transition barracks in Virginia while her fate was decided. The immunity agreement protected her from prosecution, but the Army still had to determine what to do with a sergeant who'd killed 6 people based on fabricated intelligence. The answer came on a gray morning in late November. She was called to an office in the Pentagon's E-Ring. A general she'd never met sat behind a desk covered in files. "Sergeant Vale, you're being offered a choice," he said without preamble. "Option 1, administrative discharge under other than honorable conditions. You leave the military with no benefits, no pension, no commendations. You disappear quietly. And option 2, you accept a position at Fort Benning as a senior marksmanship instructor, training the next generation of Army snipers. Different chain of command, full oversight, transparent operations." The general folded his hands. "You'd be teaching soldiers not just how to shoot, but when to shoot, how to question intelligence, how to maintain moral judgment under pressure." "Why would the Army want me doing that after everything that happened?" "Because you're the only operator in this whole mess who chose truth over self-preservation." The general leaned back. "You blew up your own career to stop a corrupted program. That's exactly the kind of judgment we need teaching our soldiers." Aria thought about it. Teaching meant staying in the system. Staying meant facing questions, judgment, whispers. Every day would be a reminder of the 6 lives she'd taken on questionable intelligence. But it also meant preventing the next Aria Vale from making the same mistakes. "I'll take the instructor position," she said. "Good. Report to Benning in 2 weeks." The general pulled out another document. "One more thing. The 12 soldiers you saved in Afghanistan submitted a joint recommendation. They're requesting you be awarded the Medal of Honor for your actions that night." Aria's stomach dropped. "No." "Excuse me?" "No medal. I don't want it." She kept her voice level. "I saved those men by breaking orders. Then I spent 3 months killing people without questioning whether they deserved to die. I don't deserve a medal for that." The general studied her. "The Valley operation and the Emerald City missions are separate matters." "Not to me, they're not. Both came from the same place, me deciding I knew better than orders. Sometimes that was right. Sometimes it was catastrophically wrong." She met his eyes. "I need to live with that complexity. A medal makes it too simple." The general was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. "Request denied is noted in your file. Dismissed, Sergeant." Aria left the Pentagon for what she hoped was the last time. Fort Benning Sniper School was different from everything she'd known. Structured, transparent, every shot documented, every decision reviewed. She taught classes of 20 soldiers at a time, showing them how to calculate windage and elevation, how to read terrain, how to stay calm when adrenaline spiked. But she also taught them what no manual covered. "The hardest part isn't making the shot," she told her first class. "It's living with it afterward. Every target has a face. Every kill has consequences. And if you don't question whether the person in your crosshairs deserves to die, you stop being a soldier and become something else." The students listened with the kind of attention that came from knowing the instructor had actually been there. One student, a young specialist named Torres, raised his hand. "Sergeant, how do you know when the intel is solid? When you can trust the target is legitimate? You verify everything you can, question sources, ask for evidence, and if something feels wrong, you say so, even if it costs you." Aria paused. "Especially if it costs you." "But what if we don't have time to verify? What if it's like Afghanistan? People are dying and we have to act?" "Then you make the best call you can with the information you have. But you own that decision. You don't hide behind orders or protocols. You own it. She looked across the class. And if you get it wrong, you face the consequences. That's what separates soldiers from murderers. The class was silent. After they dismissed, Torres approached her. Sergeant, I heard rumors before this assignment, about missions you ran. Aria had been expecting this. What did you hear? That you were part of a classified program. That you took out high-value targets solo. Torres hesitated. That some of them might have been innocent. 6 of them were questionable. 1 was legitimate. Aria met the younger soldier's eyes. And I'll spend the rest of my life wondering if I could have stopped it sooner. That's why I'm teaching you to question everything, so you don't end up where I did. Do you regret joining the army? The question caught her off guard. Did she? She thought about the valley, the 12 men alive because she'd trusted her judgment. Then about Al-Rashid. Webb, the faces she'd seen through scopes and the lives she'd ended on orders that turned out to be corrupt. No, she said finally. I regret mistakes I made, people I trusted when I shouldn't have, shots I took without enough questions. But the army gave me purpose, structure, a way to use my skills to protect people. She paused. It's not the institution that failed. It's specific people who corrupted it. And I'm still here because I believe it can be better. Torres nodded slowly. That's why you turned down the Medal of Honor, isn't it? Because accepting it would mean pretending the complicated parts don't exist. Something like that. Over the following months, Aria found a rhythm. Teaching by day, processing by night. She started seeing a therapist, a civilian contractor who specialized in combat trauma. Talked through the missions, the doubts, the weight of 6 questionable kills. You're experiencing moral injury, the therapist explained. Different from PTSD. It's the wound that comes from violating your own ethical code, even under orders. How do I fix it? You don't fix it. You integrate it. Accept that you're someone who made mistakes and chose to face them. That's not weakness, it's growth. Growth felt like carrying rocks uphill, but slowly, session by session, the weight became manageable. She also started writing letters. Not to send. Most of the families of her targets wouldn't want to hear from her, and she had no legal right to contact them anyway. But she wrote to Al-Rashid's widow, to Webb's children. Apologies she'd never mail. Confessions no one would read. The therapist said it was healthy, a way to acknowledge harm even if she couldn't undo it. Aria wasn't sure about healthy, but it felt necessary. 6 months into her instructor position, she got an unexpected visitor. Captain Ethan Cross, the ODA team leader from the Valley, showed up at the range on a humid June afternoon. He was out of uniform, wearing civilian clothes, but she recognized him immediately. Heard you were here, he said. Wanted to check in. They walked the range together, watching students practice long-distance shots. I also heard about what happened with the program, Cross said carefully. The investigation, Hayes, all of it. Yeah, for what it's worth, what you did in the Valley, saving us, that was real. That mattered. I know, but it doesn't erase the other stuff. Doesn't have to erase it, just has to coexist with it. Cross stopped, turned to face her. You made a choice that night, broke orders to save lives. Then you made another choice later, gave up immunity to expose corruption. Both of those were you choosing integrity over safety. The middle part was me not choosing, just following orders blindly. Everyone follows orders blindly sometimes. The difference is you stopped. You questioned. You fixed it. He pulled something from his pocket, a coin. The same challenge coin he'd given her months ago. 12 of us are still alive. Our families are intact, that's real. Don't let the bad erase the good. Aria took the coin. Guardian was still engraved on one side. I'm trying not to, she said quietly. Cross smiled. That's all any of us can do. Keep trying. He left after that. Aria stood on the range, holding the coin, watching her students practice. One of them, Torres, was getting better. Tighter groups. Better wind reading. But more importantly, he asked questions, challenged assumptions, demanded evidence before accepting target designations. Exactly what she'd been teaching. Maybe that was how you balanced the scales. Not by undoing harm, but by preventing the next generation from repeating it. A year after the Emerald City investigation concluded, Aria received a letter. Official Army stationery. She opened it expecting another administrative document. Instead, it was from Master Sergeant Rachel Torrance, the sniper who'd warned her about the program. Vale, heard you're teaching at Benning now. Good. The program needed to end, but the lessons don't. Teach them to be better than we were. Teach them that perfect records mean nothing if they're built on lies. I was wrong to say no when they recruited me. Not because I should have joined, but because I should have exposed it earlier. You did what I couldn't, stopped it from the inside. Keep your head up. You're exactly where you need to be. Torrance Aria folded the letter and put it in her desk drawer next to the challenge coin and the unsigned immunity agreement she'd kept as a reminder. Every object told part of the story. The coin. Lives saved. The letter. Validation from someone who understood. The agreement. Consequences faced. Together, they didn't erase the 6 faces she saw sometimes when she closed her eyes. But they provided context. Balance. She wasn't just a killer, wasn't just a guardian, wasn't just a soldier following orders or a rebel breaking them. She was all of it. Complicated. Flawed. Trying. 2 years into her instructor assignment, Fort Benning held a ceremony honoring distinguished marksmanship instructors. Aria was among them, not for her combat record, but for her teaching evaluations. Students consistently rated her courses as the most impactful they'd taken. She stood in formation while a colonel read citations. When her name was called, she stepped forward. Sergeant Vale has redefined what it means to teach precision marksmanship, the colonel said. Her courses emphasize not just technical skill, but ethical judgment. She has taught over 400 soldiers to question orders, verify intelligence, and maintain moral clarity under pressure. Her impact on the next generation of Army snipers cannot be overstated. Applause followed. Aria accepted a plaque and shook the colonel's hand. Afterwards, several former students approached. Torres was among them. He'd graduated and deployed to Syria, where he'd reportedly refused an engagement order until intelligence was verified. The target turned out to be a civilian. Torres's refusal saved a life. You taught me that, he said simply. No, you learned it. I just provided the framework. Same thing, Sergeant. Maybe it was. That evening, alone in her quarters, Aria pulled out her phone and scrolled to the photos of her grandfather. The ranch, the old rifle, his weathered hands. She thought about what he'd said. The space between necessary and cruel is where you'll find out who you are. She'd found that space, lived in it, made mistakes navigating it, but she'd never abandoned it. Even when it would have been easier to choose certainty over complexity, she'd stayed in the uncomfortable middle. That was who she was. Not perfect, not without regret, but committed to doing better, to teaching others to avoid her mistakes, to ensuring that precision didn't become callousness and that following orders didn't replace moral judgment. She opened a new note on her phone and wrote, "To anyone reading this in the future, I killed 7 people as a sniper. 1 was definitively guilty. 6 were questionable. I'll never have complete certainty about those 6, and I've learned to live with that. What I can't live with is the idea that someone else might repeat my mistakes. So here's what I learned. Trust your judgment, but verify your intelligence. Question orders that feel wrong. Remember that the person in your crosshairs had a life before you ended it. Own your decisions, especially the bad ones. And understand that being accurate isn't enough. You have to be right. I wasn't always right, but I'm trying to make sure the next generation is." Sergeant Aria Vale. She saved the note, knowing she'd probably never share it, but writing it helped, made the lessons concrete. Outside, the sun was setting over the ranges. Tomorrow she'd teach another class, answer more questions, guide more soldiers through the complex space between skill and judgment. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Not redemption. Redemption required erasing harm, and she couldn't bring back the dead. But purpose. The knowledge that her mistakes could prevent future ones, that the 6 questionable kills could save dozens of future innocents if her students learned from her failures. The math worked differently now. Not one life versus many, but one flawed teacher trying to shape hundreds of better soldiers. It wasn't the career she'd imagined when she first picked up her grandfather's rifle on that Wyoming ranch. Wasn't the glory she'd chased or the recognition she'd fought for, but it was real, honest, human, And as Aria Vale prepared for another day of teaching soldiers to see the wind and question the target, she realized something her grandfather had known all along. The impossible shots weren't the ones measured in meters or calculated through scopes. They were the ones where you had to look at yourself in the mirror afterward and accept who you'd become, flaws, failures, and all. She'd taken that shot, missed sometimes, hit occasionally, but she'd never stopped aiming for better. Thus, every trigger pull changes the world, so make sure you can live with what comes after.